Case 1. Willie Wilkerson. May 3, 2017. Boston police stormed Mission Church on Quincy Street. What they found behind the pulpit would shock the congregation forever. The man they'd trusted with their souls had been dealing death from the house of God. Willie Wilkerson wasn't just any pastor. For decades, the 58-year-old had been Dorchester's spiritual anchor, guiding families through their darkest moments, baptizing their children, burying their loved ones. Church members called him Pastor Willie, a man they believed walked with angels. Saved my marriage. He helped my son get clean. We trusted him completely. But behind those Sunday sermons about redemption and salvation, Wilkerson was running a sophisticated drug operation that would make street dealers envious. When search warrants were executed at both his Dorchester home and Mission Church, investigators couldn't believe what they uncovered. Crack cocaine, fentanyl, Percocet, Klonopin, Suboxone, over $10,000 in cash stuffed into church offering containers, stolen property hidden in the sanctuary basement. The very altar where Wilkerson had preached about the evils of addiction had become a distribution center for the deadliest drugs destroying his community. The communion table where families gathered to remember Christ's sacrifice was being used to count drug money and package lethal doses of fentanyl. But Willie Wilkerson's hypocrisy was just the beginning of a nationwide epidemic that would expose the dark truth lurking behind America's most trusted pulpits. From Boston to Hawaii, from Arkansas to Washington State, a disturbing pattern was emerging. The men and women Americans trusted most with their spiritual lives were secretly dealing the very substances destroying their communities. Welcome to Savage Case Files, where we expose the corruption hidden within America's most trusted institutions. Hit that subscribe button right now, because we're bringing you investigations that mainstream media won't touch. Stories that will make you question everyone you've been taught to trust. Case 2. Tom Brown. August 2, 1994. Federal agents descend on church property in Fayetteville, Arkansas, armed with search warrants and drug detection equipment. What they discover growing behind the sanctuary will test the very limits of religious freedom in America. Reverend Tom Brown wasn't your typical Southern Baptist preacher. The charismatic leader of Our Church had built his ministry on radical interpretations of biblical scripture, claiming that certain substances mentioned in ancient texts were actually divine sacraments meant for modern worship. But when law enforcement officers seized marijuana and peyote plants growing on church grounds, Brown's theological arguments would face the ultimate test in federal court. The raid uncovered an elaborate cultivation operation. Rows of marijuana plants flourished in carefully tended gardens behind the church building. Peyote cacti, containing the hallucinogenic compound mescaline, grew in greenhouse conditions. Brown claimed these weren't drugs. They were holy sacraments, essential to his congregation's spiritual practices. 10 days after the raid, Brown was arrested and charged with drug cultivation and possession. But rather than hiring legal counsel, the defiant preacher chose to represent himself in federal court, using his own pulpit skills to argue his case before Judge H. Franklin Waters. Brown's defense strategy was audacious. He argued that Our Church considered marijuana a biblical sacrament, referencing obscure passages about holy anointing oil and divine herbs. He claimed his congregation needed these substances for genuine religious ceremonies, protected under the First Amendment's guarantee of religious freedom. Judge Waters wasn't convinced. On November 30, 1994, he rejected Brown's religious defense entirely, ruling that federal drug laws superseded any claimed spiritual practices. The judge also blocked Brown's bizarre attempt to introduce evidence about alleged CIA drug smuggling operations involving Presidents Bush and Reagan. The jury convicted Brown on all charges. His congregation, already fractured by the scandal, completely disbanded. Members who had believed they were participating in sacred rituals realized they had been unknowing participants in federal drug crimes. But Brown's legal troubles didn't end with conviction. From his prison cell, he filed 2 additional lawsuits, claiming religious discrimination and demanding access to marijuana for his spiritual practices. Both suits were dismissed. The Tom Brown case became legal precedent, establishing that religious freedom claims cannot override federal controlled substance laws. His failed defense would be cited in future cases involving drugs and religious practice, proving that not even the most creative theological arguments could justify criminal drug activity. Case 3. Herbert Irving Miller. A routine traffic stop in Connecticut becomes a nightmare for the Methodist Church when police discover their trusted pastor is carrying one of America's most dangerous drugs. Herbert Irving Miller seemed like the perfect Methodist minister. For years, he had served his Woodbury congregation with apparent dedication, delivering sermons about moral living and spiritual purity. Church members trusted him completely until a single traffic violation exposed his shocking double life. When Connecticut State Police pulled Miller over for a routine violation, they had no idea they were about to uncover one of the most disturbing cases of clerical drug possession in state history. What started as a simple citation quickly escalated into a major criminal investigation. Inside Miller's vehicle, officers discovered crystal methamphetamine in both rock and liquid forms, enough to indicate serious personal use or potential distribution. The drug equipment found alongside the meth suggested this wasn't a one-time experiment, but evidence of systematic drug abuse by a man who preached against such behavior every Sunday. The United Methodist Church Conference acted swiftly and decisively. Within hours of Miller's arrest, he was immediately terminated from his pastoral position. Conference officials expressed shock and betrayal, stating they had seen no warning signs of drug abuse from their longtime minister. "As we never suspected anything," one longtime church member said. "He seemed so devoted, so spiritual. How could we have missed this?" Miller faced multiple criminal charges related to possession of controlled substances and drug paraphernalia. The legal proceedings highlighted the severity of his situation. Crystal methamphetamine carries harsh penalties in Connecticut, and Miller's status as a religious leader offered no protection from prosecution. The scandal devastated Miller's congregation. Many members struggled to reconcile the man they had trusted with their spiritual guidance with the drug user revealed in court documents. Some left the church entirely, their faith shaken by their pastor's betrayal. As Miller's case proceeded through the legal system, investigators worked to determine the full extent of his drug involvement. Questions remained about how long he had been using methamphetamine and whether church funds had been diverted to support his drug habit. The Herbert Miller case demonstrated that drug addiction could corrupt even the most seemingly devoted religious leaders, leaving devastated congregations to wonder how they had missed the warning signs. Case 4. Vincent Bishop. December 5, 2024. A pastor's double life as both spiritual shepherd and prison smuggler explodes when authorities uncover the most sophisticated contraband operation in Alabama correctional history. Vincent Bishop, 54, had mastered the art of deception. By day, he ministered to his Escambia County congregation, preaching about redemption and moral living. But his real expertise lay in exploiting his position as a correctional facility employee to run a massive drug and contraband smuggling operation into one of Alabama's most secure prisons. Working inside the Fountain Correctional Facility gave Bishop unprecedented access to the state's prison system. Inmates trusted him. Guards respected him. Prison administrators viewed him as a model employee. None of them realized he was orchestrating one of the largest contraband smuggling rings in state history. When authorities finally arrested Bishop, the evidence was staggering. Inside a single prison package, investigators discovered 4 cell phones, 28 grams of marijuana, 56 grams of flakka, a dangerous synthetic stimulant, and multiple cigars. But this was just one shipment in what appeared to be a systematic operation. This wasn't amateur hour, one investigator explained. Bishop had turned his ministry position into the perfect cover for a sophisticated criminal enterprise. Inmates were paying premium prices for contraband they knew would be delivered safely. Bishop's arrest sent shockwaves through Alabama's correctional system. Prison administrators realized that their security protocols had been completely compromised by someone they trusted implicitly. Emergency security reviews were implemented across multiple facilities. Initially charged with multiple felony counts, including drug trafficking and promoting prison contraband, Bishop faced decades in prison. The charges reflected the serious nature of his crimes. Smuggling drugs into correctional facilities carries severe federal penalties. But in a stunning turn of events, charges against Bishop were dismissed during his February 10, 2025 preliminary hearing. Prosecutors failed to present evidence, and the district attorney declined to comment on the dismissal. The sudden collapse of the case raised more questions than it answered. Was Bishop part of a larger corruption network within Alabama's prison system? Did his ministerial connections provide protection from prosecution? The dismissed charges left a cloud of suspicion over both his ministry and the correctional facility where he worked. Even with charges dropped, Bishop's case exposed dangerous vulnerabilities in prison security systems nationwide. His story became a cautionary tale about how religious authority could be weaponized to facilitate serious criminal activity behind bars. Case 5. Josh Price. June 2, 2023. Davidson County Sheriff's deputies respond to reports of suspicious activity at a closed Baptist church. What they discover inside will redefine the phrase family ministry. Southside Baptist Church had been shuttered for years. Its congregation disbanded long before the COVID-19 pandemic that Pastor Josh Price blamed for the closure. But former members knew the truth. Price had driven away his flock through increasingly erratic behavior well before any virus appeared. "That church has been shut down way prior to COVID," one neighbor told investigators. "I really hope they burn in hell. I'm a Christian. That is so wrong. It's wrong anywhere, but especially in God's house." When Davidson County Sheriff's deputies arrived at the church, they initially expected to find a simple case of trespassing. Instead, they uncovered one of the largest church-based drug operations in North Carolina history, operated by a father-son team who had turned the House of God into a marijuana manufacturing facility. The search revealed an industrial-scale operation: 12 pounds of processed marijuana, 32 grams of psilocybin mushrooms, 41 THC vape pens, 20 active marijuana plants, 2 pounds of concentrated THC wax. The sanctuary had been converted into a sophisticated drug laboratory. Pastor Josh Price and his 28-year-old son Matthew were arrested on multiple charges: manufacturing marijuana, trafficking in marijuana, possession with intent to sell and deliver THC wax, 3 counts of felony maintaining a dwelling, possession with intent to sell and deliver marijuana. "This guy, I met him one time, and our spirits didn't bear witness at all," said former church member Mike Lambeth. "I did not think he was a pastor, and I told a lot of the members there, y'all better watch out for him." The Price case revealed how corruption could be passed down through generations. Josh Price hadn't just betrayed his calling as a pastor, he had recruited his own son into a criminal enterprise, teaching Matthew that drug trafficking was acceptable family business. Both men faced identical charges and were scheduled for court appearances on July 25th in Davidson County District Court. The scope of their operation suggested this wasn't opportunistic crime, but a carefully planned business that used the church's abandoned status as perfect cover. The Price family's crimes didn't just destroy their own lives, they desecrated a building where generations of families had worshipped, been married, and buried their loved ones. The sanctuary that had once hosted baptisms and communion services would forever be remembered as a drug laboratory. Investigators continued examining whether the Price operation had connections to larger drug distribution networks throughout North Carolina, and whether other abandoned churches might be serving similar purposes. Case 6, Roger Christie. July 8, 2010. Federal agents storm a building in Hilo, Hawaii, arresting 14 individuals in one of the largest religious drug busts in American history. At the center, a charismatic minister who claimed God wanted him to distribute marijuana as a holy sacrament. Roger Christie wasn't just another drug dealer hiding behind religion. The 61-year-old had spent a decade building the THC ministry into a sophisticated operation that blurred the lines between spiritual practice and criminal enterprise, serving up to 70 members daily from his Moses Building headquarters. For $250, anyone could become a practitioner and receive a sanctuary kit complete with self-laminating ID cards, religious use affidavits, and sacramental plant tags. Christie's ministry operated like a spiritual McDonald's, processing members through one-hour orientation sessions before providing them with what he called cannabis sacraments. Christie claimed to have discovered that cannabis hemp was the fragrant cane mentioned in the biblical recipe for holy anointing oil in Exodus 30:23. He proclaimed himself the first person in U.S. history to be ordained and licensed by a state government as a cannabis sacrament minister. But federal investigators saw something entirely different. A 2-year surveillance operation revealed Christie's operation was far more commercial than spiritual. Wiretaps captured 17,000 phone conversations during the investigation. Undercover agents successfully purchased marijuana from Christie on 3 separate occasions, with the largest sale being half a pound. When the coordinated raids finally occurred, the scope of Christie's enterprise shocked even seasoned federal agents. Authorities seized 2,296 marijuana plants with a street value of nearly $5 million, 33 pounds of processed marijuana, 9 weapons, and 4 properties. This wasn't a small religious ministry, it was an industrial-scale drug operation. Christie's defense team argued that federal drug laws violated his First Amendment right to religious freedom. They claimed the THC ministry represented sincere religious beliefs worthy of constitutional protection. The case would test whether spiritual claims could override federal controlled substance laws. Federal prosecutors painted a different picture entirely. They argued that Christie's ministry was simply a drug trafficking organization masquerading as a religious group, with an estimated 90% of members being recreational users rather than sincere practitioners. Christie spent nearly 4 years in federal detention before his case reached resolution, held without bail after Judge Alan Kay ruled he posed a danger to the community. You would think the light would come on when the first search of his residence was made, the judge remarked after marijuana was found again in Christie's home during a subsequent search. Facing up to 40 years in federal prison, Christie finally accepted a plea deal. He admitted to conspiring to manufacture, distribute, and possess with intent to distribute 100 or more marijuana plants. His wife, Sherry Ann, pleaded guilty to similar charges involving 50 plants. On April 28, 2014, Judge Leslie Kobayashi sentenced Christie to 5 years in federal prison, with credit for time served. The judge acknowledged that Christie and his wife were sincere and religious cannabis ministers, but ruled that the government had a compelling interest in keeping cannabis illegal that overrode their religious freedom claims. As part of his plea agreement, Christie forfeited more than $21,000 in proceeds from the THC ministry operation, plus a condominium apartment that had been a gift from his late mother. The financial penalties demonstrated that his ministry had generated substantial illegal profits. The Christie case established important legal precedent that religious freedom claims cannot overcome federal drug laws, no matter how sincere the spiritual beliefs might appear. His failed defense became a template for prosecutors handling similar cases nationwide. Case 7. Ted Haggard. November 2, 2006. The most powerful evangelical leader in America stands before television cameras, his empire crumbling in real time as a male escort's explosive allegations destroy everything he's built. Ted Haggard wasn't just any pastor. As founder of New Life Church in Colorado Springs and president of the National Association of Evangelicals, he wielded unprecedented political influence. Time magazine had named him one of America's 25 most influential evangelicals. Haggard had built his reputation as a fierce defender of traditional marriage, actively campaigning for Colorado Amendment 43 to ban same-sex marriage. He preached that homosexuality was clearly condemned in Scripture, positioning himself as America's moral authority on sexual purity. Then Mike Jones stepped forward. The male escort and masseur made a stunning public allegation. Ted Haggard had been paying him for sex over 3 years, while purchasing and using crystal methamphetamine. Jones had only recently learned his client's true identity. Haggard's initial response was complete denial. "I did not have a homosexual relationship with a man in Denver," he told Denver television stations. "I have never done drugs, ever, not even in high school. I didn't smoke pot, I didn't do anything like that. I'm not a drug man." Leading evangelicals rushed to Haggard's defense. James Dobson called the allegations unconscionable. "It is unconscionable that the legitimate news media would report a rumor like this based on nothing but one man's accusation. Ted Haggard is a friend of mine, and it appears someone is trying to damage his reputation." But Jones had evidence, voicemail recordings of Haggard requesting methamphetamine. When confronted with the recordings, Haggard's story began to collapse. "I bought it for myself, but never used it. I was tempted, but I never used it," he admitted, claiming he had thrown the drugs away. Jones volunteered for a polygraph test on KHO radio, but his responses about sexual contact with Haggard indicated deception. Haggard celebrated. "We're so grateful that he failed a polygraph test this morning." However, the test administrator discounted the results due to Jones's stress and lack of sleep. As pressure mounted, Haggard's admissions grew more damaging. He acknowledged receiving massages from Jones and purchasing methamphetamine. Church officials forced him to step down, stating he had confessed that some of the accusations against him are true. On November 4, 2006, New Life Church's Overseer Board released their devastating conclusion. "Our investigation and Pastor Haggard's public statements have proven without a doubt that he has committed sexually immoral conduct." Haggard was fired as senior pastor of the church he had founded 22 years earlier. Haggard entered 3 weeks of counseling overseen by 4 ministers, including Jack Hayford and Tommy Barnett. In February 2007, Restoration Team member Tim Ralph declared Haggard completely heterosexual, a claim that would prove laughably premature. In 2009, new revelations emerged. Church officials announced that a young male church member had come forward about an inappropriate, consensual sexual relationship with Haggard that went on for a long period of time. The church reached a 6-figure settlement with Grant Haas, who later revealed Haggard had masturbated in front of him. Haggard attempted multiple comebacks, moving to Phoenix, attending University of Phoenix, selling insurance, founding new churches. Each effort failed, as his scandals continued haunting him. In 2012, he appeared on Celebrity Wife Swap with Gary Busey, a symbol of how far he had fallen. The Haggard scandal inflicted permanent damage on evangelical credibility. The man who had weekly conversations with the White House about moral issues had been exposed as a drug-using hypocrite. His fall became a symbol of religious hypocrisy that critics would reference for decades. In a stunning 2011 GQ interview, Haggard finally admitted the truth. "I think that probably if I were 21 in this society, I would identify myself as a bisexual." The man who had preached against homosexuality for decades acknowledged his own sexual attraction to men. Even in 2022, new allegations surfaced against Haggard involving inappropriate touching of young men at his St. James Church, including a minor. The pattern of predatory behavior that began with Mike Jones had apparently never ended. The Ted Haggard scandal proved that the higher religious leaders climbed, the further they could fall, and the more devastating their hypocrisy became when exposed to the world. Case 8, Steve Parker. January 26, 2023, Mount Vernon police arrest a 58-year-old pastor during a routine traffic stop. What they find in his vehicle reveals one of the most twisted ironies in criminal history: a minister helping addicts recover while secretly supplying their drugs. Reverend Steve Parker had built his reputation as Arlington's Angel of Mercy. Through his Nest Ministries and Omni Mana services, he specialized in helping people with substance abuse and mental health issues find employment and rebuild their lives. The community saw him as a beacon of hope for their most vulnerable residents. Parker's credentials seemed impeccable. State filings listed Rev. Steve Parker as the head of Omni Mana, described as a service that helps people who have had substance abuse or mental health issues find employment. His dual role as pastor and addiction counselor gave him unprecedented access to people desperately seeking recovery. When Mount Vernon police stopped Parker's 2002 Subaru, they expected a routine citation. Instead, they uncovered a mobile drug distribution center. 2 ounces of fentanyl, 2.7 pounds of methamphetamine, 2,000 counterfeit fentanyl pills designed to look like oxycodone, a loaded handgun. This wasn't personal use. This was industrial-scale trafficking. Investigators soon uncovered Parker's horrific business model. The very people he was supposedly helping overcome addiction were his primary customers. Clients who came to him for recovery assistance were instead supplied with the exact substances destroying their lives. He was simultaneously their counselor and their dealer. Even from jail, Parker continued running his operation using coded language. Recorded phone calls revealed him discussing pizza deliveries with associates, $3 instead of the usual $6 or $7. Investigators quickly realized pizza was code for drug transactions, and Parker was coordinating deliveries through his girlfriend. Parker's drug empire spanned multiple counties across Washington state. His network reached from Arlington and Darrington, where he lived with his wife, to Tulalip, where he operated a second home with his girlfriend. This wasn't a small-time operation. It was a sophisticated regional drug distribution system. The counterfeit fentanyl pills Parker distributed had been linked to numerous overdoses within Skagit County and have been a direct cause of several deaths, prosecutors wrote. Parker knew the deadly nature of his products. He had even used Narcan to revive someone overdosing, yet continued dealing death for profit. Searches of Parker's 2 residences revealed an arsenal of 30 firearms, suggesting his drug operation had evolved into something far more dangerous than simple trafficking. The weapons cache indicated Parker was prepared for violent confrontations with competitors or law enforcement. Perhaps most shocking was Parker's complete deception of his own family. He told investigators that his wife and mother-in-law, who lived with him, had no knowledge of his criminal activities. He had successfully compartmentalized his life as a respected minister and his secret identity as a major drug trafficker. Drug dealing had become Parker's primary income source. He bragged to investigators that he was good at business, using drug profits to purchase high-value vehicles like his 2011 Mercedes, registered under other people's names to avoid detection. In August 2023, Judge Thomas Verge sentenced Parker to 4.5 years in federal prison after he pleaded guilty to 8 felony charges, including drug trafficking, money laundering, and firearm possession. The sentence reflected the serious nature of his crimes and his betrayal of public trust. Parker's case represented the ultimate betrayal of professional ethics. People seeking recovery had trusted him with their most vulnerable moments, only to discover he was the source of their continued addiction. His crimes didn't just destroy individual lives, they damaged community faith in addiction treatment programs. The Steve Parker scandal proved that predators could hide behind any profession, even those specifically designed to help society's most vulnerable members. Case 9. John Lee Bishop. December 2017. A U.S. Border Patrol checkpoint becomes the end of the road for one of Washington State's most respected megachurch pastors when agents discover 300 pounds of marijuana hidden in his vehicle. John Bishop, 55, had built Living Hope Church in Vancouver into one of the Pacific Northwest's most influential evangelical congregations. For years, he had preached about moral living and spiritual transformation, inspiring thousands of followers who viewed him as a man of unshakable integrity. But Bishop's true calling wasn't saving souls, it was smuggling drugs. For nearly 2 years, from April 2016 to December 2017, the respected pastor had been making regular trips across the Mexican border, transforming his ministry vehicle into a mobile drug transport system. Bishop's smuggling career ended abruptly when Border Patrol agents at a routine checkpoint discovered 300 pounds of high-grade marijuana carefully concealed in his vehicle. The sheer volume of drugs indicated this wasn't amateur hour. Bishop had become a professional-level international drug smuggler. When confronted with overwhelming evidence, Bishop didn't attempt to maintain his innocence. In detailed interviews with federal investigators, he confessed to making 18 to 20 successful smuggling trips since April 2016. Each trip netted him approximately $50,000 in profits, a total of nearly $1 million in drug money over 21 months. Bishop's operation demonstrated sophisticated planning and execution. He had established reliable contacts in Mexico, developed secure transportation methods, and created distribution networks in the United States. This wasn't opportunistic crime. It was a carefully orchestrated international drug trafficking enterprise. News of Bishop's arrest devastated Living Hope Church. Congregation members struggled to reconcile the man who had baptized their children and officiated their weddings with the international drug trafficker now sitting in federal custody. Many members abandoned the church entirely, their faith destroyed by their pastor's betrayal. Bishop's case was prosecuted in U.S. District Court in San Diego, reflecting the international nature of his crimes. Federal prosecutors painted a picture of a religious leader who had cynically used his ministerial status as cover for serious criminal activity spanning multiple years. During his sentencing hearing, Bishop offered what appeared to be a genuine apology, telling Judge Leslie Kobayashi that he would do everything he could to bring hope and life into every person I come in contact with, and to do good. The irony wasn't lost on observers. The same man who had brought drugs and violence into American communities was now promising to bring hope and life. Judge Kobayashi sentenced Bishop to 5 years in federal prison, followed by 4 years of supervised release. The substantial sentence reflected both the serious nature of international drug trafficking and the aggravating factor of Bishop's abuse of his position as a religious leader. Beyond imprisonment, Bishop faced complete financial ruin. Federal authorities seized assets purchased with drug proceeds, and Living Hope Church faced potential civil lawsuits from members who felt betrayed. The once thriving ministry collapsed entirely under the weight of scandal. Living Hope Church never recovered from Bishop's crimes. The building that had once hosted packed Sunday services and community events stood empty, a monument to how one man's greed could destroy an entire religious community. built over decades. Bishop's case prompted enhanced security screening at border crossings, with particular attention paid to vehicles operated by individuals in positions of community trust. His success in evading detection for nearly 2 years highlighted vulnerabilities in border security protocols. The John Bishop scandal proved that even international drug trafficking could hide behind the facade of religious authority, and that no amount of spiritual credibility could protect criminals from eventual exposure and justice. Case 10, David McGee. September 2024. Las Vegas Metropolitan Police respond to a routine hotel complaint and stumble into what would become a federal investigation involving drugs, weapons, and a North Carolina pastor whose double life defied all explanation. David McGee appeared to be just another traveling pastor when he checked into his Las Vegas hotel room. The North Carolina minister carried himself with the quiet dignity expected of a religious leader, giving no outward sign of the arsenal and narcotics hidden in his luggage. When Las Vegas police knocked on McGee's hotel room door, they expected to handle a minor disturbance complaint. Instead, they discovered a scene that would trigger federal counterterrorism protocols and raise questions about domestic security threats hiding within American religious communities. Inside McGee's hotel room, investigators found a combination that sent chills through law enforcement ranks: substantial quantities of fentanyl alongside multiple firearms. The deadly synthetic opioid mixed with weapons created an explosive situation that suggested either planned violence or catastrophic addiction combined with dangerous paranoia. The number and type of firearms found in McGee's possession immediately elevated the case from local drug possession to potential federal terrorism concerns. Counterterrorism units were activated to investigate whether McGee's weapons cache represented a planned attack or simply the paranoid accumulation of an addicted individual. Perhaps most shocking was McGee's own admission to investigators about his fentanyl use. The pastor acknowledged his addiction to one of America's most dangerous drugs, a confession that revealed the devastating extent of his personal downfall, from respected religious leader to desperate addict. News of McGee's Las Vegas arrest devastated his North Carolina congregation. Church members who had trusted him with their spiritual guidance struggled to understand how their pastor had been secretly battling severe drug addiction while maintaining his ministerial duties. McGee's case raised disturbing questions about security screening for religious leaders who traveled frequently. His ability to transport weapons and drugs across state lines while maintaining his pastoral identity highlighted potential vulnerabilities in domestic security protocols. The combination of religious authority, deadly drugs, and multiple weapons created a media sensation that drew national attention. News outlets across the country covered the story of the Vegas pastor whose hotel room resembled a drug dealer's arsenal more than a minister's temporary residence. Federal agencies, including the DEA and ATF, launched comprehensive investigations into McGee's activities, seeking to determine whether his weapons and drug possession represented isolated criminal behavior or connections to larger trafficking networks. McGee faced multiple federal charges related to both drug possession and weapons violations. The combination of charges reflected the serious nature of his crimes and the potential national security implications of an armed, drug-using religious leader. Law enforcement agencies worked to determine whether McGee represented a terrorist threat or simply a religious leader whose addiction had spiraled completely out of control. The distinction would determine both prosecution strategy and sentencing guidelines. McGee's case forced difficult conversations within religious communities about addiction screening, mental health support for clergy, and the warning signs that might prevent such catastrophic failures of pastoral leadership. The McGee investigation prompted reviews of security protocols for religious leaders who traveled frequently, particularly those who might have access to weapons or controlled substances through their ministerial roles. David McGee's Las Vegas arrest represented the most dangerous combination yet seen in pastoral drug scandals: addiction, weapons, and the potential for violence that threatened both his congregation and the broader community. 10 pastors, 10 devastating scandals, hundreds of lives destroyed. As we examine these cases together, disturbing patterns emerge that reveal how religious authority can become the perfect cover for criminal enterprise. Every case demonstrates the same fundamental betrayal, the exploitation of sacred trust. Multiple cases reveal systemic failures within religious institutions to detect or prevent criminal behavior by their leaders. Churches failed to conduct adequate background checks, ignored behavioral warning signs, and created environments where criminal pastors operated with minimal oversight. Every case left behind devastated religious communities. Churches closed, congregations disbanded, and thousands of believers struggled to reconcile their faith with their pastors' criminal behavior. The spiritual damage extends far beyond the individual criminals to affect entire communities. These cases demonstrate the urgent need for systemic reforms within religious institutions. Mandatory background checks for pastoral candidates, ongoing behavioral monitoring, financial transparency requirements, and accountability structures that can detect and prevent criminal behavior before it devastates communities. The 10 pastors profiled in this investigation represent far more than individual criminal cases. They embody a pattern of betrayal that strikes at the heart of American religious life, proving that even the most sacred trust can be corrupted when accountability fails and criminal opportunity meets spiritual authority.